This is again Dr. Devanshu Shekhar Pramanik, and again I am welcoming to you all to this class. So, dear students, in last class we were discussing the most important part of the alimentary canal, that is the stomach, okay? And we are specially started with the stomach of the first tetrapod, that is the fish, and again this was a cartilaginous fish, and I had discussed about the cartilaginous fish or stomach of the cartilaginous fish, and just I want to review that slide or that part which was discussed in last session. In case of generally cartilaginous fish, the alimentary canal is long, it is long tube thrust on the left side, I had already told you in my last class, and the proximal part or proximal descending limb of the stomach is known as cardiac part, and the distal tubular part is known as the pyloric part. At the junction of the two parts there is present one outgrowth, that is called as blind sac, and the mucous glands have changed into gastric gland, and they are secreting the pepsin and the acid, and acid is usually used for, or acid is responsible for killing the bacteria, and pepsin is to digest the protein. This was the last discussion regarding the stomach. So, today we shall proceed detail about the stomach in next vertebrates and especially the tetrapods. And again in case of the cartilaginous fish, what happens? The muscular longitudinal folds, for example, so this is we are discussing about the stomach, and this is the stomach, and I am discussing about the stomach of cartilaginous fish. So, what happens? For example, this part is the oesophagus part. So, what happens? The muscular longitudinal folds of the oesophagus, for example, this is the oesophagus, and just I cut into half. So, for example, this is the cylinder, you just imagine, this is for example oesophagus, I just simply cut it longitudinally so that I am able to show you the internal structure. So, now this is the internal structure, for example, this is the longitudinal muscles of the oesophagus. So, this part is the oesophagus in case of the cartilaginous fish, and this oesophagus having the muscular longitudinal folds that continue into, for example, from this region the stomach will start. So, this will continue to the stomach also. So, this is the stomach. So, stomach part. So, the longitudinal muscle folds which are generally seen in the esophageal region that actually continues with the stomach. So, this is the most important point. And second point, a circular band of muscular or muscles forming at the cardiac region that separate the cardiac from the pyloric part of the stomach. For example, this is the cardiac part, and this is the, for example, the pyloric part. So, this is the pyloric part, we know two parts are there, this is the pyloric part of the stomach, and this is for example the cardiac part of the stomach. So, what I want to say? So, in case of cartilaginous fish, what happens? A circular band is there. For example, this is a band. So, this is a band. So, a circular band is present, or a circular band of muscle forming a cardiac valve separates the cardiac part. This is the cardiac part, and this is the pyloric part of the stomach. Again, another circular muscle fiber forms the pyloric sphincter, leading to the thick walled muscular bulb, that is called as the bursa antiana, or this is the duodenum. For example, this is the region here, one sphincter is there, this is known as sphincter, and this sphincter actually regulates the passage of the stomach into the intestine. So, two muscle bands are there, one is present here which is present in between the cardiac and pyloric part, and another one is present at the end of the pyloric part, which then continue to the duodenum, or that is the bursa antiana. Okay. So, this is all about the structure of the cartilaginous fish, and I want to show you this one in a diagram. For example, you see this is the this is the esophageal region, and we know these are the longitudinal muscle bands, and now, or these are the longitudinal muscle fibers. Then this continue to the what? This is the stomach part, and you see this is the mucous membrane, and these are also what? These are also the longitudinal folds. So this is the pyloric stomach, and this is the what? The cardiac stomach, and you see this is the blind sac, one extension, and this is the sphincter valve, and here also there is the sphincter valve. Okay. So then this continue to the what? This is known as bursa antenna. I have written here bursa antenna. So this part is again what? This is the intestine part or duodenum. That means this is the cardiac part of the stomach, this is the pyloric part of the stomach. One valve is there, that is communicating the cardiac part with the pyloric part. Another valve is there which is actually known as bursa antenna, which is actually regulating the passage of the pyloric part with the duodenum. So this is found in case of the shark or scoliodon, or this is also known as elasmobranch, or this is also known as salachi. Okay. So now come to the next point, the stomach in bony fishes. So this is all about the stomach in what? Cartilaginous fish. Now we shall study or we shall discuss about the stomach of bony fish. So this is the osteothix, that is the common, for example, Labiorhita like fishes. So in bony fishes, the separation of the cardiac and pyloric part is marked by a slight curvature. For example, you see this is for example the what? Cardiac part, and this is for example immediately followed by the what? The pyloric part. So this is the curvature. So in bony fishes, this is the cardiac part, you know, and this is the for example pyloric part. So what it is observed or what we are observing, in case of bony fishes, the cardiac and pyloric stomach are differentiated by their internal lining also. So here the internal lining is to some extent different from the internal lining of the pyloric stomach. Again, so in case of them, the cardiac part presents a honeycomb appearance, whereas or while the pyloric part actually has longitudinal zigzag folds. So here this part having honeycomb structure, and this part having the zigzag structure. So this is observed. So this is the internal lining of the fishes. So this is all about the stomach of the bony fishes. Now come to the next vertebrate or next tetrapod, that is the amphibian. So now we shall observe or now we shall discuss about the stomach of the amphibia. Okay. So in case of amphibia, especially for example I am taking the example of frog. In frog, stomach is cylindrical, it is cylindrical, and the pyloric part is short and narrow in comparison to the what? In comparison to the cardiac part, because we know the stomach is divisible into two parts. The first one is the what? The cardiac part, and second one is the pyloric part. In case of amphibian, what happens, or in case of amphibia, the pyloric part or pyloric part of the stomach is shorter and narrower in comparison to the what? Cardiac part. Again, the internal lining of this stomach is thrown into a number of longitudinal folds that sets the peristaltic waves. Okay. Gastric glands, in case of the stomach, the wall is again what? Beset with, the wall possesses the gastric glands, and in case of amphibian, the gastric glands are composed of only one type of cells which secrete acid and pepsin. That means just I want to say, for example, this is the wall of the stomach. For you see, this is the wall of the stomach, and this is the for example outer side serosa, then one muscularis, then the submucosa and the mucosa like that. This is the transverse section. So now you see the glands are present in this region or the what? The wall. So these are called as gastric gland. And the most important thing is that this is the gastric gland, and the gastric gland possesses these cells. Okay, these are the cells, and the cells which are present in the gastric gland, they are actually that the same cell present or lining the gastric gland is again assigned with the duty of, or the same cell is secreting two type of fluid. The first one is the acid, that is the dilute hydrochloric acid. Second part or second one is the pepsin. That means the same cell is secreting two fluid. The first one is the hydrochloric acid and second one is the what? Pepsin. And you know this acid is for killing the bacteria, that means it acts as one antiseptic agent, and pepsin is an enzyme, and this enzyme is involved in digestion of the food material. That means what I have told you till now, in case of fishes the same cell is secreting two type of fluids, in case of amphibians the same cell is secreting two type of fluids, one is acid and one is enzyme. And in case of the amphibian, a pyloric sphincter actually present that separates the stomach from the intestine. That means the content of the stomach enters into the intestine by that means it is regulated by one sphincter, that is called as pyloric sphincter. Okay, this sphincter actually regulates the passing of or passage of content of the stomach into the intestine. So that is the pyloric sphincter. So this is all about the stomach of amphibians. So now come to the next, that is the reptile. So you know reptiles are again more more complex than that of the amphibian, they are more developed than that of the amphibians. So in case of reptile, so I am again discussing about the stomach. So don't forget, because this is a comparative anatomy class and we are to discuss about the particular organ in different vertebrates, and today's discussion is now till now continuing with the stomach. So in reptiles, division of stomach into cardiac and pyloric part is not well demarcated. Again, this is not well demarcated. So which part is the cardiac part and which part is the pyloric part, this is not well marked, well demarcated in case of reptiles. Okay. So this is all about the reptile. Now come to the birds. So in case of birds, what happens? So this is the bird. So now I shall discuss the stomach of the bird. In birds, again the stomach is divisible into two parts. Again, as provision, the stomach is having two chambers. The first one is the the cardiac, and second one is the pyloric. Similarly, in case of bird, two chambers are there. So in birds, the stomach is having two parts, two chambers. The first one is granular proventriculus, that is the cardiac part. So in case of bird, so this is the cardiac part. So the first part is the cardiac part, and this is known as, in case of bird, proventriculus. You should remember, dear student, proventriculus. So in case of bird, the cardiac stomach is known as proventriculus, and this is also known as granular stomach. And it is again following the another one, that is the most important, that is the ventriculus, the second part, that is the this is the pyloric part, and pyloric part, again this is the pyloric part, this is known as ventriculus. Okay, this is ventriculus. But in case of bird, this is completely modified. What happens in birds? The stomach has two parts. It is obvious, the granular proventriculus, that is the cardiac part, and the very muscular, that is ventriculus, that is pyloric. This is commonly called as gizzard. Again, this is this is the gizzard. In case of bird, this is known as gizzard. So gizzard is the ventriculus or pyloric part of the stomach. Gastric juice in them, again the stomach is lined with gastric gland, and gastric juice is secreted in the proventriculus, and some digestion takes place here. That means gastric juice is not secreted in the pyloric part, that is the ventriculus part, rather it is secreted in the proventriculus part. And in seed eating birds, again in seed eating birds, the gizzard is a biconvex. I shall show you the diagram. The gizzard is a biconvex and very hard structure. Again, so for example, this is the, you see this is the cardiac part, or this is the proventriculus, and this part is the gizzard. So in case of bird which are seed eating, okay, so in them the gizzard is having strong muscular wall. So this is the gizzard. So this is the gizzard, and this gizzard, in seed eating birds, it is biconvex and very hard structure. The strong muscles in the wall of the gizzard, they form disc-like structure, and these are known as, that means the strong muscles in the wall of the gizzard are forming pair disc-like areas with tendinous muscle. What is that? Or tendinous center. Actually, these gizzards, in case of for example pigeon, they are filled with pebbles, okay. So small pebbles, so small what, stone like structure, stones present in this gizzard, that means the graminivorous bird which are taking seed, they also take some pebbles, small stones, and that stones are deposited in the gizzard. So due to muscular action of the gizzard, these stones will mix with the food material, so that the food material will be grinded. So this is the provision of the gizzard. So what happens, I am again repeating this one, the strong muscles in the wall form, that is in the wall of the gizzard, form a pair disc like areas with tendinous center, number 1. Number 2, pigeon habitually pick up small pebbles, so small pebbles, so this is pebbles, so small pebbles, and these pebbles which in the gizzard help in crushing the or grinding the food material. The gizzard is also known as chewing stomach. So this is also known as chewing stomach, chewing. So the gizzard is the most important part which is concerned or which is associated with the digestive system of the bird, okay. So this is the most important structure. So now in this picture I just want to show you the gizzard, you see. So this is the what, crop, we know this is the esophagus, again in case of bird a structure is present, that is known as crop, and now this is the what, stomach. So from this is the esophagus ending here, this is the stomach starting of the stomach. So this part is known as proventriculus, this part is known as ventriculus, you see this part is known as gizzard, it is labeled here gizzard, and the gizzard will continue with the intestine. So again I want to show you the detailed structure of the gizzard, you see this is the gizzard. So this is again the proventriculus, the stomach, and this is the what, cardiac opening, and this is the gizzard region, and in this gizzard region you see what, some pebbles are present, some stones are present, and this is the muscle, this is the what, longitudinal section, this is the strong muscle of the gizzard. So when the strong muscle will contract, at that time the material which are been present in the gizzard along with the pebbles will be grinded. So this is helpful for what, grinding of the food material. So this is found in case of the gizzard of what, bird. So now come to the next part, the most important part of this discussion, that is the stomach of the mammal, and for example I am telling the stomach of human also, the most important one, the stomach of mammal. So this is the mammal. So in case of mammal, the stomach is highly developed, including men, men is also belonging to mammal, so in men. So in mammal, the stomach lies on the left side of the abdominal cavity. For example, I am standing here, this is my abdominal cavity, this is my thoracic cavity, stomach always lies at the left side, okay. So in mammals, the stomach lies on the left side of the abdominal cavity, it is present in the abdominal cavity, and in rabbit, so for example I am taking the example of rabbit. So in rabbit, squirrel and men, stomach is transverse shaped with a greater dorsal curvature and lesser ventral curvature. What I want to say, for example, this is the stomach you see. So this is the dorsal curvature and this is the ventral curvature, okay. So you see, so this is the stomach. So this part is the stomach having, this is one curvature, this is the dorsal curvature. So this is known as dorsal curvature. So this is the ventral curvature. So always the ventral curvature is lesser than the dorsal curvature. So this is sac like structure or bag like structure. So in rabbit, mammal, that is rabbit, man, squirrel also, the stomach is transverse sac with a greater dorsal curvature and a lesser ventral curvature, number 1. Number 2, the end of the stomach, nearer the esophagus is the cardiac region, that means this region is which is connecting to the what, esophagus, this is the cardiac part, this is the cardiac region, and next part is the pyloric region. So the end of the stomach nearer to the esophagus or terminal part of the stomach connecting the esophagus is known as cardiac. The next is the main part, this is the cardiac, the main part, this is known as fundic part. So this is the fundic, so fundic part or fundic region, this is also known as fundus, and this is followed to the next region, that is the pyloric. So always pyloric is a narrow region. So, in case of mammal, the stomach is a large bag-like structure, large sac-like structure, and this sac is divisible into three parts. The anterior one, which is connecting the esophagus, is known as cardiac stomach. The main body is known as fundic part, and the narrow region communicating to the intestine, this is known as pyloric part. Okay, so the pyloric region is followed by the followed by the fundic region. So a pyloric sphincter is also present. A pyloric sphincter actually present at the junction of the pyloric stomach and the intestine, and this sphincter guards the opening of the stomach into the duodenum. So this is, for example, the pyloric sphincter, and spinal sphincter will follow the intestine. So this is the intestine, and here the sphincter is there. So this is the sphincter. So this sphincter is known as pyloric sphincter, and this sphincter actually regulates the passage of the food material from the stomach into the into the intestine. Okay. So now come to the next part. So if I observe the lining of this stomach, then what I shall see? Internal lining of the stomach is thrown into longitudinal folds which set up peristaltic waves of contraction throughout the pyloric end and down into the intestine. Because you know the intestine, that means the alimentary canal, is characterized by one type of movement that is known as peristalsis, or this is also known as peristaltic movement. So this is known as peristalsis. So peristalsis is one type of contraction wave that follows from one point to other point, and this peristalsis is a rhythmic contraction and expansion continuing from the mouth, that means from esophagus to the rectum or last part of the alimentary canal, so that the food material will always pass unidirectionally. So this peristaltic movement is set due to presence of well developed longitudinal muscle fibers throughout the intestine. The most important part again in the stomach, that is the longitudinal lining of muscle fiber, which actually brings or which actually set up the peristaltic waves of contraction towards the pyloric end and down to the intestine. Okay. Then come to the next point of the stomach, or important part of the stomach. The stomach again has a lining of high columnar mucus secreting cells. Again, stomach has a lining of high columnar mucus secreting cells folded to form million of deep gastric pits. So what I am telling, so if this is the longitudinal part of the stomach. So now let us see the transverse section of the stomach. So if this is the transverse section of the stomach, you see. So now these are the mucus region or mucus lining. So now these are the deep, that means the folding region. So what I am telling, stomach has a lining of columnar mucus secreting cells folded to form billions of deep gastric pits. The ducts of the long tubular gastric glands open to the bases of the gastric pits. So they open here, and according to their distribution, the gastric glands may be, that means throughout the stomach there are present the gastric glands, and according to their location, the gastric glands are of again different type. So for example, so this is the gastric gland. So you see this is the stomach, for example. So this is the stomach communicating with the that is the esophagus, and this is the stomach which is communicating with the intestine. So this is the intestine part, and this is, for example, esophagus part. So this is the area of the stomach. So now some glands are present in this area which are known as esophageal glands. Okay, gastric glands are again of different type according to their distribution. Some are distributed throughout the esophagus, that is the anterior part of the stomach. They are known as esophageal glands. Okay, some are distributed in the cardiac region, so they are known as cardiac glands. Some are distributed in the fundic region, they are known as fundic glands, and some are distributed at the pyloric region, they are known as pyloric gland. That means I want to say that the wall of the stomach again contains a number of gastric glands, and these gastric glands are again named according to their location, according to their distribution. So these glands are oesophageal, these glands are cardiac, these glands are fundic, and these glands are pyloric. So these are the names of the gland. So now we shall see the histology of this one. So they differ both in their histology and type of secretion. What I want to say? I want to say that they differ actually both in their histology, that means glands are of different types, their histology means the cells are of different types, and also their secretion. Because I am telling you that oesophageal, then cardiac, the pyloric and fundic different glands are there, they secrete different fluid. So they differ both in their histology, number one, cell structure, cell arrangement, and also in their secretion. So the gastric glands are lined by three kinds of cells again. So why they are secreting different type of chemical or different type of fluid? Because they are lined with, for example, this is the wall and these are the cells. So for example, I am taking one example. So what is that? The gastric glands are lined with three kinds of cells. Neck cells. So for example, one gland which is actually lined by one cell, and that cell is called as neck cell. For example, this is another one. This is actually lined with another type of cell that is called as chief cells or zymogen cell. So this is known as chief cell, and this cell is also called as zymogen. So this is another part, for example, and for example this is another part, and for example you see these are the cells. So here this is what these are the cells, and these cells which are lining this part, they are called as what? The oxyntic cells. For example, this is the oxyntic cell. So as different type of cells are there in what I told you that histologically they are different, means different type of cells are there in their gastric gland or in the gastric gland. So what happens? The gastric glands are lined with the three kind of cells. The first one is neck cell producing mucus. So what they produce? These cells are secreting mucus. Okay. The chief cells, again the chief cells, or they are also called as zymogen cells, they produce what? These chief cells, they produce the enzyme that is pepsinogen. So my dear student, remember this one, because gastric glands again possess different type of cells, and a particular type of cell is secreting a particular type of fluid. So in this case, the neck cell is secreting mucus, the chief cell is secreting the pepsinogen. So pepsinogen is an inactive enzyme. Similarly, the oxyntic cell, this cell is secreting the hydrochloric acid. Okay, this is the dilute hydrochloric acid. Okay, they are the cells present in the stomach. Okay, so this is all about the function of the glands or cells present or lining the stomach. Now come to the next part, oesophageal and cardiac glands. Again remember, oesophageal and cardiac glands produce mucus. Okay, so what is that? So oesophageal glands, the glands which are present at the anterior part of the stomach, oesophageal gland, and the cardiac gland. So what are they? They are also the gastric gland. So they actually secrete mucus. At the same time, what happen? The next part, the oesophageal and cardiac glands produce mucus. Glands with all types, again second part, most important point, the glands with all types of secretions are found in the fundic part. Okay, that means all type of fluids are secreted at the fundic region. And the pyloric gastric glands do not have oxyntic cell, they produce only mucus. That means throughout the stomach, anterior part which is communicating to the esophagus is secreting mucus, number one. The pyloric part which is communicating with the intestine, that is secreting mucus, but the fundic part having all type of cells, they are secreting, that means they have all type of cell, neck cell, chief cell and oxyntic cell, they are secreting all type of fluid in the fundic part. So from this it is concluded that the stomach in one hand is engaged in or responsible for digestion of the food material partially, because pepsinogen was enzyme. Pepsinogen is an enzyme which can digest the protein part of the food material, and oxygenatic cell which is secreting the cell that can kill the bacteria. So, mucus can mix the food material to make a pasty like solution. So, these three fundamental fluids are very much important to make the food partially digestion, secondly killing the bacteria, thirdly making the food into an pasty like structure, that is known as what? That is known as chyme. So, this is known as chyme, so that this chyme liquid can enter into the intestine for final digestion. So, for this reason stomach is very important. Secondly, from the G cell of the stomach, the most important cell, that is the G cell which is present in the stomach, they secrete one hormone that is known as gastrin. Okay. So, that gastrin also secrete the proenzymes. So, that will be discussed in later session. Let us take a break for this session and we shall discuss the most of the important parts in the next session. So, let us take a break.